blogandtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. Hope you're happy. I hope you hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you managed to have something go right in your sports world this weekend. Today is Sunday, October 26, 2025. This is the postgame, our Dallas Cowboys postgame show here at Blogging the Boys. You can watch this show live on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel or on the Bleacher Report app. Shout out to our friends at Bleacher Report who help power our postgame shows. You can watch it either place. You can obviously catch the rewatch on your own time at your own convenience on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. Please make sure to subscribe, like the video, all that fun stuff. I'm on social. You can hang out with me. Instagram threads at RJ Ochoa, TikTok, RJ.Ochoa. Email is rj.ochoa@sbnation.com. Or you can leave a comment down below on YouTube. You can find links to the social profiles I just mentioned in the description. I'm all out of sorts because this game, Sunday's game for the Dallas Cowboys against the Denver Broncos, presented itself as an opportunity. Sunday's game was an opportunity. Sunday's game was a fork in the road. The Broncos entered this game in week 8 in their beautiful throwback uniforms, looking like one of the very best teams in the NFL. They certainly look that way now, although there's definitely a Cowboys tax that we have to apply to each and every single team who plays them so we don't overreact to how awesome their offense looks. But because of the reputation that Denver had built up for itself, this game for Dallas was an opportunity. Go to a place where you haven't won since 1992, beat a team who you haven't as a franchise since 1995, which means nothing, but still is just kind of a thing that's out there, and prove that you belong in the conversation with contenders. Prove that you are legitimate. Prove that this offense that we have rightfully been gassing up and hyping up can go toe-to-toe with one of the best defenses in the NFL, maybe the very best defense in the NFL. That was choice one. That was the blue pill. The red pill, which the Cowboys very clearly took, was to fall on their face and throw up all over themselves and act like they had no idea what the sport of football was. This was embarrassing to the highest order for the Cowboys. And the most frustrating thing is that on some level, I think we all thought this was going to happen. I think we were afraid to let go of any assumption that this would happen. This was a chance. This was an opportunity. This was a fork in the road. This was a decision between two paths. It was a choose your own adventure, and the Cowboys, as they have for a very long time now, not quite 30 years, but they chose the path that was more volatile, more dysfunctional, more chaotic, and ultimately more embarrassing. I see all of you on YouTube. Thank you for hanging out. Andy says the next game on Monday night is a must win. The Cowboys are probably going to win their next 2 games, and that's what's so frustrating about all this is the Cowboys are going to get to, what would that be, 5-4-1. The Cowboys are on Monday Night Football each of these next 2 games. They host the Cardinals a week from tomorrow. They have their bye after that and then head to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders. What's particularly frustrating is the Cowboys are about to be shoved in our faces. In case you don't know this, I want you to just understand. You need to understand the next few weeks for the Dallas Cowboys. They're going to play the Cardinals on Monday Night Football. That's an Island primetime game. Island being no other game is on at the same time, obviously. Then they're on their bye, but then they're on Monday Night Football again in Vegas, taking on the Raiders. After that, the Cowboys do play the Philadelphia Eagles on a Sunday, a conventional Sunday, but it's going to be the afternoon window, going to be Fox's game of the week in all likelihood, going to draw a bunch of people watching it. And then they're on Thanksgiving Day, big-time Island game. Then they're on Thursday Night Football against the Lions. That's an Island primetime game. Then they're on Sunday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings. Then they host the Chargers in an early window Sunday game. And then after that, they play the Washington Commanders on Christmas Day. Each and every single one of the NFL's primary broadcast partners, we're talking about CBS, Fox, NBC, Amazon Prime, and Netflix, are all about to get their piece of the Cowboys. They're each going to have an Island primetime, big-time game for the Cowboys. So this embarrassing thing that we keep watching on a weekly basis is about to be in front of the whole world on a very, very, very frequent basis. I see you on Bleacher Report. 3J says, why would we automatically believe they are going to win a game? That's a very good question. D-Day2 on YouTube says they always fall on their face on the road. New York just doesn't count. Michael on YouTube says the Dak haters are about to come out from under a rock. Yeah, I mean, that's the frustrating thing. And look, we have been saying this for a long time, right? I think we were rational about this. We have said that the Cowboys offense was maybe the best in the NFL. It was playing like the best in the NFL. That wasn't coping. That wasn't, over whatever. That wasn't just being a silly fan. That was objectively defensible, right? Like the Cowboys offense was playing like the very best one in the NFL. They did not play that way on Sunday against Denver. But what is frustrating, as we have been saying throughout this run that the offense has been on, is that this is not sustainable. They were never going to have just this season where they could put up 40 points at will. They don't get to play their own defense every single week. They were always going to have a game or multiple games where they were flat, where they were imperfect, where they made mistakes, where they had to be carried. And what's frustrating, even though we knew this was the case, is we saw it on display against the Denver Broncos. That cannot happen. This defense, and I mean this in no insulting way, I mean this with as much respect as possible, they can't do that. They can't carry the load. They can't put the offense on their back and say, we got you, we'll pick up the slack. No, they have to be carried. This defense is offering quite literally nothing. This defense is contributing quite literally zero to the overall function of the football team. Yes, I understand they had an interception on the first possession of the game for the Broncos. Shout out to Bo Nix. I mean, that was very kind of Bo. We're getting close to the holiday season. Maybe he was in that type of mood, that type of spirit. Next week's Halloween, it was an early trick or treat. That's the, mandatory cliche joke that I have to make. I mean, other than that, this was pure and total domination by the Broncos offense. And I mean no disrespect to the Broncos offense, but because they were playing the Cowboys defense, they are that bad. So it's frustrating that the Cowboys offense cannot have a day, a moment, a play, a series, a possession where they are not on their A-plus game. Because if that happens, if they have such a play or a series or a game, the defense is going to make them pay like hell for it. And we saw that against the Denver Broncos on Sunday. On YouTube, Mr. Boyks, I think I'm pronouncing this correctly, says, should have hired Rex Ryan. Guys, like, I love you all. I really do. There's no way that Rex Ryan is fixing this. That's on Bleacher Report, by the way. There's zero way. Like, we can fully and totally come for this defense and this coaching staff and all these things, but Rex Ryan is not the answer that you think he is, I promise. On YouTube, Michael says, Broncos always kick our ass. Look, this is one of those things that I don't fully understand how it continues to be the case, because we're talking about something that has transcended time and different rosters and different coaching staffs and different stadiums. But the Cowboys are completely and totally owned by the Green Bay Packers, right, and the San Francisco 49ers. But from an AFC standpoint, the Denver Broncos. The Cowboys lost on Sunday to the Broncos because they always lose to the Broncos. The Cowboys still have not beaten the Denver Broncos since 1995. They have not won in Denver since 1992. This is now 8 games in a row that the Denver Broncos, as a franchise, because again, this involves a lot of different people, fully and totally 100% different operations from a roster or coaching staff perspective, but 8 games in a row that the Cowboys have lost to the Broncos. If not for the fact that the Cowboys actually beat the Broncos in Super Bowl 12, we would really hate this franchise, but we've got that in our back pocket, so we're okay. It is very weird. It is very strange, but shout out to all Broncos fans, because you get to say you own the Cowboys, and that is objectively true. There's no denying it at this point. Yeah. Anyway, on YouTube, John says Williams was the only person who actually did something today. I am going to get somewhere that I've been anxious to get to in my early tirades. I want to talk about the trade stuff. I see some of you chatting about it, but I can't wait any longer. There is no defending Brian Schottenheimer's decision to punt late in this game. 4th and 5. I recognize the field position game is a somewhat dangerous or treacherous one, but the Cowboys were down by a significant margin. The Cowboys were losing and had to score points. And more than that, beyond the fact that they needed to score points, Brian knew that the Cowboys defense could not defend the Broncos at all. And if you don't believe me, if you think I'm just making that up, consider that the Broncos had 2 real possessions because of the way this game got out of hand and the starters got benched and whatnot. They had 2 real effective possessions after Brian Schottenheimer's cowardly decision to punt, and they scored touchdowns on both of them. At the very best, Brian Schottenheimer's decision to punt was waving the white flag and was forfeiting and was saying, yeah, we're getting out of Dodge. But that doesn't fully jive because he still sent Dak Prescott out and other starters out. So I can't buy that from a logical perspective. At worst, that was a gross misunderstanding of his football team from Brian Schottenheimer. At worst, it was a complete and total miscalculation and misunderstanding and misplaced level of hope and trust in things relative to his team, relative to his staff, because that decision to punt, the Cowboys lost this game way before then, but that was the moment. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. And Brian Schottenheimer has done a lot of good and still, in a macro sense, deserves a lot of kudos for how he has taken over the Cowboys as a head coach and a play caller and all these sorts of things. But we talk a lot about the disposition and the culture that he has begun to enact and said he was going to enact, and choosing to punt there as the head coach and as the offensive play caller, as the leader, that was very cowardly and that was illogical. Forget the fact that it was cowardly. That's a matter of subjective argument and debate. It was illogical, particularly when you factor in that the Cowboys defense could not stop anybody, which again is exemplified by the fact that they literally did not stop the Denver Broncos from any point forward after he chose to punt. It was one of, in fact, the sample size is obviously very small, but I would argue that that was the worst decision that Brian Schottenheimer has ever made as the Dallas Cowboys head coach. I recognize we're not talking about 100 games here, but that was the lowest. That is the low right now when we look at the totality of who Brian is as the Cowboys head coach. Let me see your thoughts in the chat. DB Cooper says we suck. Michael says 100%. I agree with you. Thank you very much. Obviously, because you're agreeing with me, so I agree with you agreeing with me. D-Day2 on YouTube says, same with the punt before the half on 4th and 1. He plays scared on the road. Here's the thing. I'm okay if you play scared, right? Like, I'm not okay with it, but I can process if you're a scared play caller. I can process if you're a scared coach, because at the very least, you're the same, right? If you're going to be scared, or whatever we want to call is scared, and you're that same person, rain or shine, or a night or day or whatever, if that's who you are, if that's your metronome and that's how it beats, okay, then we can follow that line of logic. But consider that when Brian Schottenheimer chose to punt on that 4th and 5, that the possession prior to that, he chose to go for it on 4th and 3. Now, admittedly, the possession in which Brian chose to go for it on 4th down, we're still talking about the second half here. That was not quite the same field position. It was the Denver 27-yard line. But to that point, the Cowboys were down 3 possessions, and he chose to say no to a Brandon Aubrey field goal. So he turned down points in the name of more points, which the Cowboys ultimately got, obviously, by way of the Javonte Williams touchdown, the second one. So why did he do that? You can't change. You can't adjust who you are and then defend them both, because these things are operating at either end of the spectrum. They don't follow the same logic. They don't follow the same North Star. If you're going to be the guy that goes for it on 4th and 3 from the Denver 27-yard line, good for you. Respect. Even if you don't get it, that's still the right decision. You did get it. You were justified in going so awesome. So why then one possession later on 4th and 5, even though you are obviously on your own side of the 50, we can understand that. We can contextualize it. We can apply the right and necessary amounts and levels of details to make this conversation fair in both ways. But why one possession later, after you told us you were that guy who was going to go for it, why did you turtle up? Why did you all of a sudden decide to punt it away? And again, that conversation would be fair to have, even if you did not have one of the worst defenses in franchise history on the other side, but you happen to. So that elevates and exacerbates the level of oomph that you have to have relative to going for it. That was a massive, massive, massive failure from Brian Schottenheimer, and it is really difficult to look past it. There's a lot of good that he has done, and I don't want to overlook that and make a mountain out of this molehill, but this molehill is significant, and he should offer some explanation as to what the line of logic that he had behind it was. In fact, let me see here. I haven't seen any notes from Brian at this point in time that we are live. No. Okay, so I'm sure he'll address that short enough. On YouTube, John says the pre-snap penalties killed us all day. Michael says Arizona's a trap game. I agree. Madsen on Bleacher Report says then we get our offense back on the field. 3J says, I'm not mad at the head coach. He has been aggressive most of the year, just a brain fart today. That's fair too, right? Like, I want to be very clear here. Just because Brian Schottenheimer did not have a good game on Sunday against Denver, and he did not, I think he'd be the first person to say that he did not. In fact, at halftime, he told CBS's Tracy Wolfson that he had to call better plays and whatnot. He's definitely someone who takes a lot of self-accountability, self-responsibility. That's something I think we all admire and respect about him. But this was not a good game for Brian Schottenheimer. There are a lot. There are mostly good games. In fact, mostly very good games from Brian Schottenheimer. But we have to call things the way they are as they happen. And Sunday against Denver was without question the lowest point of Brian Schottenheimer's Dallas Cowboys head coaching career to date. Again, we're talking about a sample size of 8 games, so nobody's trying to be over dramatic here relative to what we're talking about. But this was, I would argue, of the reasons the Cowboys lost this game, Brian Schottenheimer is chief among them. And that is true inherently because he's the head coach, he's the offensive play caller. But in addition to this illogical decision to punt and back and forth and whatnot, this Cowboys team also had a number of pre-snap penalties. In fact, it became a trope on the CBS broadcast, and that ultimately goes back to coaching. That ultimately goes back to discipline. And these are things, these are qualities, these are themes that Brian Schottenheimer has talked about that supposedly hold high levels of importance within his football organization. So you cannot tell us about how you're going to be aggressive, how you're going to be disciplined, how you're going to be attacking, how you're going to be on the front foot, how you're going to have strong culture, how you're not going to doubt yourself. You can't tell us all those things and then literally run contrary to them in a game and not expect us to notice. This was a bad game for Brian Schottenheimer. I'm sure there are great ones on the way afterwards, but Sunday against Denver was not his finest hour. On Bleacher Report, RB Cowboys says Matt needs to go to maybe salvage this season. Look, I've said this before. Like I am uncomfortable. I recognize what I do for a living, and I'm very grateful to do it. And I'm so grateful that it would bother me if somebody were to call for my job. I'm just, maybe I'm overly sensitive, whatever. But I don't enjoy calling for people to be fired. I don't enjoy saying someone is bad at their job. I don't think anybody enjoys that, right? I think we can all have an adult conversation. I think we all can kind of explain the situation as it is. And right now, there is, look. If the Dallas Cowboys want us to believe that they are serious, they will do something on defense. I don't know what that is. And I don't want to pretend like I have an answer, because I don't. I don't know what that is. But you cannot just change nothing and expect us to believe that you're taking this seriously. We're not overreacting. We're not being silly. We're not being dramatic. In many, many senses, we're looking at not just the worst defense in the NFL, and not just one of the worst defenses in Dallas Cowboys franchise history. In many ways, we are looking at the literal worst defense in Dallas Cowboys franchise history. You are literally reaching lows that most teams and defenses that have worn this uniform have not. So you cannot tell us everything's fine, we're working hard, it's all about the scheme. Dude, quit playing so soft. Quit playing off. I mean, you're just inviting all this. At one point in the game, Jim Nantz noted that the Denver Broncos were averaging over 9 yards a carry. That's absurd. That's impossible. That shouldn't. And look, that might be funny to be true in like the first quarter after a team has had, 1 or 2 possessions and something's inflating them. But this was in the second half. I mean, it's absurd that so much football had happened when Jim Nantz was able to say this in a truthful manner. This Cowboys defense just seems to not really care. And I don't like saying that either, because I'm not going to accuse someone of caring or not caring, but the results really speak for themselves right now. And they're not doing anything to show or exemplify that they do care enough to change anything, because if they did, they theoretically would. On YouTube, let's see here. Jonathan says 2020, y'all are talking about some of the worst defenses in franchise history. So Brian Schottenheimer is at the podium now. The Athletics, John Machota says, Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer says, it's one game, we didn't play well, we didn't coach well, but this happens in this league. Now, look, I understand you got to say the right things, you got to be political, all that stuff. Like, please shut the hell up. Like, I'm just, that is not enough right now. We went into this game, we sang your praises, we pumped you up, we carried your water last week after you rightfully earned the right for us to with your destroying of the Washington Commanders. We sang your songs and we said that you were turning a corner. You cannot just like, woe is me, oh, it's one game, whatever. No, you can't do that. This was an opportunity for you to prove yourself, and you didn't just lose. You failed. You were at no point seriously competitive with Denver. I mean, seriously, that did not happen at a single point in this game. And so to just be like, well, it's one game, whatever, blah, blah, you don't have that right. You don't have that luxury. You are 3-4-1, bro. I mean, like, the water is hot. This isn't a matter of like, oh, everything will be cool. No, it's not going to be cool. You're flying way too close to the sun at this point in time. And you're so close to things really, really, really unraveling here. So to just lump it up to like, oh, whatever. And I recognize, again, you're just going to say the proper things in front of the media and behind a microphone and all this different stuff. But that just really, really, really falls on deaf ears at this point, in my opinion. Jimbo says, firing Eberflus isn't going to improve the talent on defense. You all are so annoying. I agree with this. I really do. I recognize that Matt is the easy target, and Matt is not doing himself any favors. Let's be very clear here. Multiple things can be true. I think we all would love for the Cowboys defense to have turned a corner last week against Washington, because look, we make so much of, and rightfully so, that it is a constant talking point about how this defense is on its third defensive coordinator in 3 years, right? That's not sustainable. That's not viable. That is so flagrant that recently on the radio, Jerry Jones even actually took accountability for it. All right. So I don't want it. I don't think any of us want them to have 4 defensive coordinators in 4 years. That's like more unsustainable or non-viable as the current non-viable situation. And to be clear, that is not enough of a reason to not make a change. I'm not arguing don't make a change so that you don't have to deal with more of a change. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is this is a mess. And now everything you're doing, you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. Like everything is dysfunctional and chaotic. You need some level of consistency. Consider that the Cowboys defense is so bad right now, and they still don't want anything to do with Trayvon Diggs. I mean, this is a team that is in just like this weird dysfunction on the defensive side of the ball, and they just are floating and chilling and whatevering and just figuring out life as it goes along. Look, you cannot expect to continue to just make changes and fire people potentially. And I'm not even arguing against firing anybody, but that is not necessarily just this magic cure-all, because this defense has a lot of issues and they continue to just change and expect something to immediately happen. And that's not going to be the case regardless of who you choose. Jonathan says, I want a fourth DC in 4 years. I agree on some level. Let's see here. Brian Schottenheimer continued after the game, said, I see us every day. I see what we're capable of. We're not very consistent. I think we're a talented football dude. I mean, again, no one is going to buy this right now, man. You have no benefit of the doubt. That's the thing here. The Cowboys can say X, Y, or Z, but they have zero benefit of the doubt right now. They are bankrupt relative to benefit of the doubt. So again, you can talk about how you're trying and you know your guys and you know your locker room and there's no quit. We've seen the quit. I mean, like we have eyes. We have seen that you have the quit. We have seen that you are not as talented as a lot of other teams. So to sit there and say those things, we get it. That's your job, and that's just kind of what you have to do. But we're not going to fall for it just because you're saying it. We're going to offer you our thoughts and our opinions. And right now, I don't want to speak for anyone more than myself, but I think right now those thoughts and opinions are that this team's not good enough. And until Sunday, I think we thought that maybe it was just the roster that wasn't good enough. But I think what's terrifying or frustrating about Sunday's loss specifically to the Broncos is that tugged at the thread that maybe the coach isn't the right one. Maybe the coach can't get it done. And that's not fair because Brian Schottenheimer has done a great job. But this game was so specifically underwhelming that you have to at least ask those questions. And I think after you ask them, you still come back to the fact that he's been so great. He's been an amazing offensive play caller for the most part. And everybody has an off game and everybody has a bad moment and whatnot. And I think that's ultimately what Brian is saying. But you do not have any benefit of the doubt. You do not have any currency built up for us to lean on and say, okay, you can do this. Teams like the Eagles, they can have all this crazy, silly drama going on, and it is dumb, and we're pointing our fingers and we're laughing at it. But you know what? They have a whole hell of a lot of benefit of the doubt in the bank that they can withdraw from whenever they want. They can say, look, we can be as silly and as dramatic and as crazy and as whatever as we want. Our results speak for themselves. You don't have those results right now, so no one is going to buy what you're selling. On YouTube, let's see here. Toxic Sooner says it's time people accept this team is average. We beat over average, below average teams and lose to real contenders. You said sorry, other, not over. I agree with that to some degree. Look, this is I'm going to explain my fear. This is my fear. This is where I'm at now because look, I don't like to speak for anyone. I say that a lot, but I think that we all think that it would be irresponsible. And this is all obviously based off of what happened on Sunday against Denver. And not that anyone's trying to overreact, but it's a new piece of information. It's a new piece of context. It changes how we feel about things. That's the way information works. I think that we all think that this team, the Dallas Cowboys, they have zero business sending any kind of premium assets, draft capital before the trade deadline in the name of contending and competing right here, right now throughout the 2025 season. That would be categorically irresponsible, not only based on what we saw, but it's a loss, right? Like now your odds and likelihoods from a mathematical and measurable, objective, data-driven standpoint are more severe than they were when we were having these conversations early last week. So while I think we all feel this way, my fear is that the front office is going to go, holy crap. Oh no, we're on the verge. We got to do something. Okay. Now we're willing to overpay. Now we'll do anything. Now we got 2 first-round picks. Pick whichever one you want. You can have either one, right? Like you can have both. You can have both these first-round picks. That would be the worst case scenario. It's unfortunate how Jonathan Mingo continues to catch strays, but what we don't want, I think, collectively is that. We do not want you to go throw away even a 4th-round draft pick because I think we're still pissed about that on a player who can't even, at this point, almost a year later, get on the field for you because the trade was that poor from an evaluation standpoint. So you do not need to just go, open another credit card right now. That's not what would be wise. That's not what would be in the best interest of this team long-term. 2025, it's always hard to admit, but you have to have a hard conversation with yourself and say it's probably not in the cards this year. So do not do anything stupid. Do not do anything irrational. Do not do anything, ridiculous and part with draft capital that can be used in the future to help get you out of this hole that you have dug yourself and trapped us all in together. On YouTube, Jonathan says he doesn't even play. Talking about Jonathan Mingo, it is very frustrating. G. Speth on Bleacher Report says it's the owner's fault. Don't blame the players. Look, here's the thing. Jerry Jones is the primary culprit here. Like I'm fully with you all, but to act like the players hold no blame or no responsibility is ridiculous. I mean, that's insane. The players were horrible. I mean, and again, coaching matters, and there's enough blame to go around. I promise. If Stephen Jones wants, we can carve it up by way of a pie the way he likes. But the players are definitely at fault here. The ownership is at fault. The leadership is at fault. There's a lot of blame here. We can put it in the proper places, and some of it definitely falls on the shoulders of the players. Let's see here. Toxic says, I agree completely with what you're saying. Don't knee jerk. And I worry that they're going to do it. And I think we kind of thought, right? Like, I think we all thought that Sunday's game against Denver was going to somehow, some way change the math involved in whatever trade the Cowboys are inevitably going to pull off before the deadline this year, which is November 4th, in case you didn't know or in case you forgot. And I think had the Cowboys won, it would have given them a bit more negotiating power, right? It would have given them, even beyond negotiating power, it would have given them a better sense about who they are themselves. It would have kept them grounded. But by losing, and not only by losing in completely embarrassing fashion, it untethered them from reality. It untethered them from anything rational. It now has them floating in the great beyond, and they will do anything to get back to what they define to be reality, what we all define to be like hell, watching this team on a week-to-week basis. So they cannot, view this the same way we do, right? And look, we're not sitting here saying we could do a better job of running the team. I don't think any of us are saying that. I think we are on some level in like a fun fan way, but I think that the fact that the Cowboys lost in such a humiliating fashion is only going to drive that insecurity that they have to pull something off by way of a trade that is completely and totally hazardous towards the long-term health and honestly the current health of the franchise, which again is exemplified by what they did before the deadline last year when they sent a 4th-round pick to the Panthers for Jonathan Mingo. Let's see here. Glenn says Parsons was not a good run stopper. He could not have helped. I'm sick of talking about Micah Parsons. That has nothing to do with what happened today. Let's see here. Michael says many of the players playing on defense are not NFL caliber. Jonathan says Tolbert, Sam Williams, and a third from Max Crosby. Look, what makes you think that the Raiders would want them? And even if you thought the Raiders would want them, they're both on the final years of their contract. Like, that's just, if you're going to throw out hypotheticals, be fair, be real. Don't just say, oh, these two dudes I don't want. It doesn't make sense for anyone involved, even if they really like the players. On Bleach Report, the greatest 929 says, RJ, do you think Matt Eberflus is just a bad defensive coordinator, or is the defense struggling because they don't have their players? I think that multiple things can be true in anything in life, but let me be very clear here. I don't think that Matt Eberflus is putting his team in the best position to succeed. I think he absolutely is subject to his fair share of blame, his fair share of responsibility for the atrocity that is the current Dallas Cowboys defense. I also think it's fair to give the man some grace in that, his best player was traded away a week before the season began, that he has not had even a full year as the defensive coordinator to figure things out and kind of establish things the way he wants them to be. The fact that the defense is coming off of a 1-year defensive coordinator following a long tenure with another guy. Like, it's not Matt Eberflus's fault. He's the third guy in as many years. Like, all of that is important context, and those aren't excuses for Matt Eberflus, but they are part of the conversation. And so I also think that the roster is not very full. I mean, consider that the two highest points of optimism that the front office has relative to their defense. And I hope, like all things, that DeMarvion Overshown and Savon Ravel play very well for this team, not just in 2025, but in the future. But they are literally building all of their hope on a foundation of two players coming back from serious injuries, talking about Overshown and Ravel here, one of whom, in Savon Ravel, has literally never played in the NFL before. And so it's not Matt Eberflus's fault that this is the weird, contorted reality that he has to perform his job in. But at the same time, he's also not performing his job at a satisfactory level. It's way below satisfactory. And so it's fair, I think, to name him as a culprit. But this is definitely a crime that was committed by a group of people, not just one single individual. On Bleacher Report, Cable says, also, don't think there's enough cap space for Garrett. I don't know if you guys are talking about Myles Garrett. There's no way that's happening. Jonathan says, such hope is foolish, RJ. It is foolish. It's insane. It really is insane that the Cowboys are dependent and relying on DeMarvion Overshown and Savon Ravel to save them this season. But that's how they built their team, right? Like these are the materials that they put in the plane when they took off, and we're in the air already, right? Like we're not at a point where we can, reassess on the ground and say, instead of bringing this, let's bring this. No. Like they're in the air. And so they only have to work with the goods that they brought with, and they have to repair the thing as they're flying. And so it is unwise to place such a level of responsibility on DeMarvion Overshown and Savon Ravel because they're coming back from serious injuries, but that's the Dallas Cowboys way. They are selling that hope beyond all things right now because they don't really have anything else. On YouTube, let's see here. K Randolph, is it Key or K Randolph? Excuse me if I mispronounced. So I disagree a little. They could use that capital and get a great player right now for future years. Rookies are too much of a risk considering that we don't draft good defensive players except Micah. That would be honestly how I look. If the Cowboys traded for Max Crosby, obviously if they overpay, we would freak out. But I think ultimately we would be happy, not just because it would salvage some semblance of really, really long shot hope that we have for the 2025 season. But Max Crosby is under team control through the 2029 season for all intents and purposes. So the Max Crosby trade still carries some serious logic, and it still carries logic in the sense that, well, how likely is it? This is the proverbial question, right? Like, how likely is it you're going to draft somebody as good as Max Crosby in the 2026 NFL draft with these first-round draft picks? Like, you can have this conversation in a back-and-forth way. So the Max Crosby trade still makes a lot of sense if you're building towards the future. But like Trey Hendrickson doesn't really make any sense now because he's on an expiring contract. You won't have him in 2026. And we could talk about netting a compensatory pick and all that stuff. But this team, we don't want to overreact to one game that's never the goal or never the intention. But one game is still a game, and it changes the math. It changes the equations. It changes the reality. And so the impetus towards winning now or this window or 2025, that undeniably shrunk, right? Like that window closed a little. In fact, you could argue it closed a lot on Sunday with how they lost to Denver. And not just, again, that they lost from a quantitative standpoint, but that they looked like they had no business sharing a field with one of the best teams in the NFL. So if you can't beat Denver, what's to say that you have a snowball's chance in hell against Kansas City or Detroit or the Chargers if they're, turned around by the time you face them, or the Eagles when you get them again, or if you're somehow lucky enough to stumble into the playoffs, right? Like this game invites those questions that aren't necessarily measurable from a quantitative standpoint, but when you parlay them with the losses value from a quantitative standpoint, it makes it a really difficult thing to look at 2025 and still say, this is our year. Let's see here. Jonathan says Diggs and a third for Crosby. Again, I would offer, what makes you think somebody else wants Trayvon Diggs? Like, why would somebody give up something? I mean, I recognize the spirit behind these ideas, and I appreciate that, and I applaud that, but I just don't see how that's likely at this point. Why would the Raiders want to do that? Let's see here. LSU just fired Brian Kelly. In case anybody is curious, that just happened a few minutes ago. I know that was kind of talked about all day long, but that is officially happening. As a Florida Gator grad student, back the hell off of Lane Kiffin, because that's what we're doing. So you better not ruin this LSU. That's all I'm saying. But that was notable, to say the least. Let's see here. I'm seeing if there. This is a good tweet. It's from Patrick Walker of DallasCowboys.com, good friend of the show. Patrick tweeting out, I asked Brian Schottenheimer, at what point does preaching Cowboys self-discipline but still seeing critical error penalties turn into policing penalties with playing time? It's a great question from Patrick, so shout out to him. Brian said, yeah, absolutely. Pre-snap penalties, for example, that's a discipline thing, That's something that needs to be looked at. Everything will be evaluated. I can promise you that everything will be evaluated. See, like, I respect the answer. I really do. But what are you going to do about it? I mean, what's going to happen? And to Brian's credit, we've seen that the Cowboys are seemingly moving on from Trayvon Diggs. So there is some, there's something he can say. There's something he can point to and say, that's what I'm going to do about it. So I don't think that that's necessarily falling on deaf ears. And to be fair, there's a lot happening around Brian Schottenheimer. I'm not going to blame the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys for the Dallas Cowboys being dysfunctional, because we all know the dysfunction behind the Cowboys starts ultimately way higher than the head coach. But yeah, I'm trying to see if there's a quote from Brian about the decision to punt, because now I haven't seen anything yet. No, this was This was a really, really tough day for the Cowboys. And look, I think if your response, and I understand where you're coming from, but I think if your response to people being upset about Sunday's Cowboys loss is it's one game, y'all are overreacting. I don't think anybody's saying, well, the fact that they're 3-4-1 instead of being 4-3-1 is the biggest issue in the world. I don't think that anyone's saying that at all. I think the origin of the take, I think where everyone's coming from, their standpoint, their disposition, their mentality, I think it's all coming from the reality. And maybe some of you will say, oh, I knew this way before Sunday against Denver. But Sunday against Denver proved that this Cowboys team cannot go toe-to-toe with a contender, cannot go toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the NFL. The Cowboys were relatively healthy, right? Like we can quibble about that, and certainly every team has its things that we could quibble, but for the most part, from a foundational standpoint, from a most important players on the team standpoint, the Cowboys were relatively healthy facing the Broncos. So you were relatively healthy. You had nothing but good vibes coming off of the week's prior win against the Washington Commanders. And so if that was not enough for you to have enough steam to get through this game and to go toe-to-toe, to at least hang, like forget winning for a second, but to at least not, pee down your leg against one of the best teams in the NFL, then I don't know how it can happen. And look, seasons are long. Lots can happen. Things can change. The Broncos are a great example of how things can change on a dime. They did it within a game, as everybody talked about throughout the broadcast, against the Giants in Week 7. But Sunday's game against the Broncos, for people who, maybe we're still holding out hope, and it wasn't ridiculous to hold out hope. I think it was kind of a splash of cold water. I think it was this isn't going to happen. If you can't even just, not embarrass yourself against a team like that, then you really have no chance against the other competitors across the NFL. And that's why people have the reaction that they do following the Broncos loss. Jimbo says, oh, I don't know. They can go. Oh, okay. Sports fan says any record with a 1 in the tie column just makes things sound odd to me. LOL. I agree. It's difficult to say. It's a mouthful. It's a tough thing. Cable on Bleacher Report says, I wouldn't say that they can't go toe-to-toe with a contender. They went the distance with the Eagles. Sure, and they went the distance with the Packers. But that was a long time ago, right? And to that point, things can change. Maybe they can change, but you're further behind the 8 ball, right? Like the Cowboys are already at a point where no team in franchise history has come back from in terms of making the playoffs. And that's not to say that it can't happen now. There's 17 games in the regular season. All that stuff, matters. And as long as you have 1% chance, you got a chance to do this. Like, I agree with that. But the reality, as we get deeper and deeper and deeper into the season, these things hold less value, not just value in terms of hope, but actual mathematical relevancy value. And so they're 3-4-1 now, right? We're not having this conversation about the Cowboys looking bad against Denver and falling to 1-2-1, right? Where you have more games to go. The amount of runway is diminishing. The amount of runway is decreasing. So you are quite literally running out of opportunities. We've said for weeks now that the Cowboys are going to have to find a way to make up for the fact that they lost games like Chicago and Carolina. They're going to have to steal one. They're going to have to take one that they shouldn't at some point in time between now and the end of the regular season. Denver was one of those opportunities, and maybe they steal a different one. That is totally possible. But the reality, again, is they are running out of runway. They have to get up in the air, and we're having serious conversations because the point in time is becoming more serious with each passing week. Let's see here. A. Matson on Bleacher Report says professionals don't need coddling. This defense needs to know they suck and that they suck hard. You go for it in every 4th down and you send a message. I'm still not seeing anything about Brian mentioning the decision to punt. So nothing there. But, Andy says, do we really want to see Dallas in the playoffs this year? Yeah, I think, look, people say things like that all the time, and I'm not looking to pick on you, Andy, but like the Cowboys look really bad right now. I'll be the first one to say that. In fact, if you want to say that, get in line, all right? Because I have a lot of demerits and a lot of things that I want to say about this team. But the question, do we want to see this team in the playoffs? Hell yeah, because anything can happen, right? Like at the end of the day, I know that this is a hard thing to be heard right now, but the Cowboys have a quarterback playing at an MVP level. He did not play that way on Sunday against Denver. I'm fully with you. They have one of the best, pass catching duos or trios in the NFL, if you include Jake Ferguson. They have one of the best run games in the NFL. Like these things are still true in totality, despite the fact that they really weren't on Sunday against Denver specifically. But I will fully and totally absolutely 100 out of 100 times take a ticket to the playoffs when I have those things going on, because once you get there, anything can happen. And I don't say that in like a Disney anything can happen way, but I say it in like a really legitimate anything can happen way. And those opportunities are so precious. So I would never say no to them. That's just kind of where I'm coming from. Thank you very much to Little Buddy on YouTube for the super chat. Says big Shoddy fan, but 4th and 5 on your 44, big spot there with a defense that can't get a stop. Definitely turning point. But seriously, how can this defense be fixed? Don't need to be great or good. Just have to be okay with this offense. I could not agree more. The decision to punt was cowardly. I mean, it was cowardly at the very best. It was misguided in most ways, in every way. It was really, 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 really just sobering at worst to see that Brian Schottenheimer either didn't care or doesn't understand why it was a bad decision. Here's the thing. Look, these things sound funny, and I'm not saying them to be funny. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm not trying to be silly, but our expectation for the Cowboys, we're not being ridiculous. We're not being, over the top. Our ask, our request is not even to be average, right? Our request is like, dude, just go be the 20th best defense, right? Like we've been saying this, like just go be at the top of the bottom third. Hell, be at the top of the bottom fourth, right? If you can just be there, if you can just hang around there, that should be enough. It wouldn't have been enough against Denver. To be clear, the offense failed, but if you can be that, then things will be mostly good. That's how low the bar is. And the Cowboys defense is still saying, hey, we're going to fall short. That bar, like it is so low, but check us out. You think we can't, fall under this bar? Oh, check out our zone defense, right? Like the bar is 400 stories high. Our seriously low bar is on the moon to the Dallas Cowboys defense. I mean, and we have lowered our standards and lowered our expectations, lowered our requests. We have been kind and gracious about it. And they're still like, nah, I can't do it. I mean, it's amazing. It's an amazing phenomenon. Let's see here. Jonathan says, yeah, playoff Green Bay number 2 can happen. That's true. This was a really tough day for the Cowboys. Really, 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 really tough day. So, yeah. All right. Well, I hope you all had a great weekend. I hope you all had a fantastic time. If you're an LSU fan, maybe you feel some reprieve because your football team is moving in the right direction. Who knows? But what an embarrassing day for the Dallas Cowboys. I think the most troubling thing is like we say things like what a really embarrassing day for the Dallas Cowboys. And I think as fans, because we love the team so much and we care so much, we feel that embarrassment. I know that somebody in your life, whether it's a friend or a coworker, a classmate, whatever. And when games like Sunday against Denver happen, your phone's blowing up and they're hitting you up and they're laughing at you. They're sending those cry laughing emojis and it just sucks. And we just have to eat it. And so on some level, I think that we all think that we feel more embarrassed, right? And that's what we're struggling to reckon. We're struggling to reckon the misery that we feel and looking at the team and saying, you don't seem to be feeling this. You don't seem to be as bothered as we are. And that's a fan talking, all right? That's how we are operating. I get that. But the results on the field kind of suggest that we're not too far off because, I mean, look, we're not talking about like their third really bad defensive performance, right? This is week 8. I mean, this is week 8, and they have had decent weeks. They've had a very good week, but for the most part, they have had nothing but historically bad weeks, and they have not done a single thing to say that is unacceptable. And to us, that is the hardest pill of it all to swallow. It's a tough scene. All right. I was saying, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Hope you all eat something delicious. Enjoy the Sunday night game. Enjoy Monday Night Football. I'll be back on Monday with a video recapping all of this here on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel, but my YouTube channel, which is linked in the description down below. I'm very excited. I'm scheduled to interview Minwoo Lee. I also cover golf here at SB Nation, so looking forward to talking to him about his TGL team today. So if you want to check that out, you can certainly do so. But videos each and every single day here on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe. You can hang out with me, follow me on social media. Like I said, the links to all of my social profiles are down in the description below. Thank you, everybody, for all of your time, all of your energy, all of your love, all of your comments. Those things really they make days like today feel better than we thought they did. And that's why I like hanging out here. So thanks so much, everybody, for hanging out, and we will see you next time.